Michigan Wolverines, 2023 national champions. I know that I can't say that enough for Wolverine Nation. It will not get old, I'm sure. We got Nelson Hubble here from Maize and Blue Review. And Nelson, since I do make that a connection, I'm one in the camp of saying, hey, without the fans, without the support, this doesn't exist. So fans, I believe, can say, hey, we won. We're the champions. We're the... So congratulations, national champion.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. We were just talking about this, but for a team to win a national championship, it's so rare. We know that Michigan sits as one of the top 5 probably programs, across the history of college football. And it's been 26 years since they won a shared title, and it's been longer. It's been 1948 was the last time they won an outright title. So Michigan fans will enjoy that. And, that brings up a conversation that I have with a lot of people who don't watch or, enjoy sports the same way that many of us do, is the sort of we thing, right? Using the word we to describe your association with a team, whether it's a collegiate team, a professional team. And you hit the nail on the head, I think, in that this whole thing doesn't exist without the fans, right? The money, the support, all of that comes from the fans. And so, Michigan fans get to sit and the morning after, the next day, the afternoon after, the day after, in the next 364 days after that national championship game and say, we did it.
Absolutely. That's where I stand. And I understand the other argument, the other side of it. You didn't lift a weight. You didn't watch any film. You didn't go out there and make a tackle. You didn't do anything in terms of a tangible impact. However, actually you did, because again, this is a club sport on a university. If there's not support from the fans packing out 100,000 in the stadium and watching on TV and creating all the revenue that makes all of this possible. All right. Michigan at times, many times during this game, dominant on both sides of the ball, came out right away and established dominance up front, physicality at the point of attack, physicality by the running backs, not just Blake Corum. Khalil Mullings had, and he's dragging guys around the field in the first drive. And of course, Donovan Edwards, boom, makes his appearance and makes it with a huge statement in the national championship game. So 3 backs contribute to a dominant touchdown drive to start out the game. And that really set the tone.
It did. And I think, like you said, that set the tone. When you come into a game like that, and a lot of people believe in deferring the kickoff to the second half, that's what happened. Michigan had to receive the ball, and they went down the field and scored immediately. And that settles a lot of the nerves, I think, across the board for your team. Just because now, the onus is on Washington to respond. Washington has to answer now, and for a very good offense to do so, you sort of expected them to. They went down, got a field goal, but, Michigan was able to settle in immediately. And then those big runs, and then you're looking at the game and you're thinking, hey, we're dictating the pace. Even though they went down the field and scored 3 points, on their first drive, they did it at the pace that we wanted to. They had to take every inch. They did not get any big plays until late in the game, and that was what a lot of us were expecting. Is okay, can Michigan play the way that they want on offense and the way that they want on defense? That wins it. If Washington plays the way that they want on offense, then we're talking about a really close game, or maybe Washington pulls away a little bit. But that didn't happen, and Michigan dictated the pace of the game, and they played really well at the line of scrimmage and had those big runs, just being able to move the ball when it mattered. And here we are, 34-13.
Yeah, in many ways, this game broke the way I anticipated, because I just think that Michigan's the more complete team, and then they had several paths to victory, and Washington basically was hanging on the left arm of Michael Penix and elite receivers to get it done. Not that they don't have good players in other spots, obviously, but they are driven by that and that alone. So when looking at the game, I always tend to look at the loser and then think, how could they have won this game? Was there a time or two where it could have turned, even though it was 34-13 as a final? So if somebody just picks up the box score, looks at the final score, it doesn't look like a competitive game. And throughout stretches of it, it was not a competitive game. However, because of some decisions made, there was a 4th and 3 situation, of course, in which Michigan could have punted, driven Washington deep. I actually thought that that was the right decision to make. They were at the Washington 39. They were in no man's land. They were running the ball well. I may have chosen to run the ball instead of pass the ball. Really good play by the Washington linebacker to get over there on coverage on Roman Wilson. But there were several key points in this game where Washington maintained contact, even up to about 8-10 minutes left in the game. They were right there. They were within a touchdown, and Michigan was able to shut them off each time.
They were, and that's the big key, right? And they did it without getting very. I mean, they got 1 sack. That was Kenneth Grant, who absolutely mauled the left guard and got to Penix. But beyond that, there were only 2 sacks in the game, 1 for each team, and so it was pretty clean pass protection wise. But Michigan, and we talked about this, Mark, was able to move the pocket from the interior and get Penix to move around a little bit, and so he wasn't able to get great throwing lanes like he's been so good at maneuvering in the pocket. And so Michigan did a great job there. Defensively, and I think that was the key, right? You give up only 13 points to the number 1, number 2, passing offense in the country, right up there in the top of all of college football, and that was the big discussion. And now you think about Michigan's defense as maybe one of the best that we've seen in the 21st century. 2021 Georgia's right up there, and statistically, and then you look at what Michigan's done, and so, hey, I mean, this is. Don't let it be understated. One of the best defenses in college football in the last 20 years or so. And Jesse Minter called a great game. And then on the offensive side, obviously, Michigan did exactly what they needed to do. Like you mentioned, a couple decision-making errors there. I would have agreed to have run the ball maybe on that 4th and 3, throw to Rowan Wilson, or even maybe just, it seemed like Sherrone Moore and J.J. McCarthy had a miscommunication on what play was going to be installed there. Or where he wanted McCarthy to go with it. If you go to look at some of the tape, McCarthy goes to the sideline and Moore is, pointing at his play sheet and sort of telling JJ that he messed up. And so you have those mistakes, but Michigan played well enough that they could overcome them, and Washington could not overcome their own.
Yeah, Michigan was clearly the better team. I don't think there was any question about that. But again, there were a number of opportunities, and I would go through as I was charting this game and mark, okay, well, Washington blew it there, or they've got an opportunity here. And that's part of it in regards to Michigan's defense didn't miss the throws that Michael Penix missed, especially to Rome Odunze a couple times where he flat out missed him downfield or he didn't see him. But that's part of the deal. If the other team's not good enough to get it done, then that's not the onus of the. Yeah. There is going to be I don't want to call it a luck factor, but an unforced error factor in every game. Teams are not flawless. They're not perfect. Individuals are not perfect. One of the big plays in the game was Washington still within a touchdown. It's about 10 minutes left, 12 minutes left. They're at midfield. They go for it on a 4th and 4. Their running back drops the pass. Otherwise, they get the first down. Who knows what would have happened after that? But Michigan was, there were those little tenuous points where Washington had that window of opportunity, and they either blew it or Michigan closed them off. And then the rest of the game, Michigan was just flat out just a better football team, just a more physically dominating football team, and just a more complete game. I'll go back to that term, more complete team.
It's what they did all year, and that's the thing, is you kept waiting for Michigan to maybe become something that they weren't. Hey, maybe they're going to start throwing the ball all over the place. Maybe they're going to bring out some part of their scheme that we haven't seen yet on offense. Didn't happen. They didn't have to. Michigan was able to introduce new wrinkles into both sides of the ball during bowl practice and even over the last week, maybe getting some of those ready for Washington, especially on defense in the secondary. But they did what they've done all year. You watch a lot of these Michigan games and you felt, oh, man, they left a lot on the table opportunity-wise, a couple decisions here and there that maybe they would have won by more if they got. But man, they dominated everybody across the board all the way. And it's one of the more impressive seasons in the history of college football. One of, I think, 6 teams to go 15-0, if that might be right. Just a handful at least. And so, to see that and them to do it in their own identity in their own way, and to stay true to that, it's a testament to the player-led team that they are and the coaching staff that they have to let their players lead and put them in situations and positions to succeed.
I'm going to look at it a little bit differently than what you just stated, and maybe I caught that wrong when you said they were dominant start to finish. I don't know if you were talking about this particular game or the entire season. The way I see it is that their schedule was backloaded, and for being criticized for not being battle tested until late in the season, they ended up being extremely battle tested. They dominated early a bunch of marginal opponents. Then once Penn State showed up, and people may discard Penn State at this point after they've lost 3 games, but they're still one of the 10 best football teams in the nation when they're all put together. And Michigan was clearly the better team. Close game, competitive game in certain aspects, but Michigan was a better team. They get challenged by Maryland. They make the big plays, 2 picks on Tunga Valaya. Boy, did I botch that name. For as many times as I've said that, Talia Tungavailoa. Yes. And blocked punt there against Maryland to break open that game. The Ohio State game, again, the better team, but man, it came down to about a 35-yard field and they lose the game. Bama takes them to the brink. They got to pull off 4th and 2. So they got tested late in the season and they were on the brink there a number of times, specifically more so Maryland, Ohio State, and Alabama.
Yeah, and they answered the bell every time, and maybe dominated wasn't the right word, but they asserted themselves in their own, play style, at least in each of those games. They didn't get away from what their identity was. And you look at what they did on offense, 5 turnovers on offense all season long. Incredible. And 4 of them came against Bowling Green. That was one of the games I was at, and it's one of those things you're watching, and it's early in the season. That was, I think, the 3rd game of the year, and you're watching this team, and you wonder, that can't keep up. And it feels like it's an anomaly, but is it? And it's so early, you got to wait and see. Turned out it was. And consistency-wise on offense, when it comes to turnovers and penalties, I mean, you saw it in the national championship game. Very good. They weren't penalized very much all season long. And Washington, now we can talk about some of those if you want, whether it was a holding call that was called against Washington or some of those pre-snap penalties, I think had a pretty big impact on killing some drives, false start, snap infraction, those sorts of things. But Michigan was start to finish this season, seems like against everyone they played, the more disciplined team, the better team across the board. When you finish, the game, you look at the summation of everything and you think, okay, the better team won. And that's why you get to 15-0. I really think that is.
Yeah, I think you can look at any football game, and whether it's holding at the line of scrimmage or it's holding downfield, I think that there are egregious acts of holding that have to be called. And then there are decisions that the officials make, and maybe they make it with the entire trajectory of the game in mind to say, hey, I've allowed this to a certain extent, but this just passed the line and we got to rein this back in, holding. And we saw that a few times. And I don't think that that really favored either team. I know that Michigan detractors are going to point to some issues there. And it's another key point in the game in which Penix hits a ball downfield for 35 yards or so. They have a big play inside the 15 or 20-yard line. Were they down a touchdown at the time? I can't remember what the score was at that point, or if they were down by 2 at that point. But they gets called back with a holding call. But I thought it was the right call to make. There were a couple times where Michigan runners got free, and I think it was pretty obvious that there was holding. But I'm also guessing that if we diagnosed every Michael Penix drop back, we would see other holdings that were not called.
Yeah, I mean, that's football. And you look at these games, and there's going to be, what's the saying? There's a hold on every play.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with illegal contact a lot of times, downfield. I saw some illegal contact more than a couple times, And that's one of those penalties that I don't really like, because it's so subjective as to when the official wants to call it. And holding's kind of that way in a lot of ways. But yeah, you can only let people get away with it so much. And I didn't feel like you said, it favored either side too much. And so, the issues that Washington had that we've talked about to this point are the reason they lost. And that's how it goes in any game. I mean, really, the Ohio State game for Michigan, very rarely in games that are competitive, are there not points in the game where you can say, well, hey, if they did this, this, and that, they would have won. I mean, you could say that about any game. You could say that about, if they had a better quarterback, they would have won the game. It's just football. That's what it is. It's what it is. So we look at these things and we talk about them because they matter and they had an impact on the game. But the result happened for a reason. And I think, most people can say Michigan went out there and earned that win, 300 yards rushing, absolutely incredible national championship game record for BCS in playoffs. So yeah, it's pretty impressive what they did.
Yeah, again, I just kind of see that as my role here in looking for possible avenues in which the loser could have won the game. But there is no question that Michigan was the better football team. It wasn't debatable. Now, you can argue again, if this would have broke, if that would have broke, if that would have broke, it would have kept Washington in the game. But it was not a close game. They had a window of opportunity. They took it till about, 8-9 minutes left in the game. That's when it all broke, and then Michigan took charge, and that was that. I also found this number to be very revealing leading into this game, because everybody considered, okay, Michigan's pass attack's pretty average. Their wide receiver core pretty marginal. Washington's this elite group at both quarterback and wide receiver. I tend to dismiss the compilation of numbers, meaning the total offense, the total passing numbers, all of that. Washington throws the ball more. They're going to gain more yardage. Pass efficiency going into this game. And now consider this. Nelson, I did a breakdown where I looked at each position unit, rush offense, rush defense, pass offense and defense, and then against the opponent, and then how each of those units stacked up against the better opponents this season, which for Michigan was typically Ohio State and Penn State, and then on down the line. Well, much of that is a self-fulfilling prophecy, obviously. The Big Ten's a big defensive conference. Oh, are the offenses bad or the defense is great? Well, you know what the answer is? It's somewhere in between. I think it tends to, now that we've looked at the postseason and the season play out, that it's a stronger defensive conference than a bad offensive conference. And again, I'm not going to sell it as a great offensive conference. The quarterback play was generally down. However, when you see that Michigan was number 5 in the nation in pass efficiency, and Washington was 11 against a weaker defensive conference, and Michigan's going up against Iowa, Penn State, Ohio State, that are top 5 pass efficiency defenses, legitimately that good. And they only threw the ball 20 times against Ohio State, but 16 completions, not turning the ball over, and this wasn't JJ McCarthy's best game by any stretch, nor did they throw the ball that well, but that told me a little bit more about, maybe Washington's not that pristine and perfect throwing the ball.
Yeah, I mean, you even look at their, where they rank point-wise. I think they're 10th in the country in points per game, something like that. And you wonder, well, hey, they're such a great offense. They move the ball so well. This quarterback, their yardage totals and all these things. But still they were 10th in points. But it's college football too, which is a lot. There are a lot of teams that are just really, really good at one thing. And some, you take that with a grain of salt. But I like what you pointed out about the efficiency ratings and some things that maybe give a little bit more of a tell into what the conference and the competition that they're going up throughout the year is. And that's where the struggle is when you're predicting a game, right? Is how much is that sort of the other numbers that we're looking at here, how much does that actually mean in relation to the competition that they're playing? And that's why my prediction was 34-31 Michigan wins. Well, Michigan got to 34. Maybe I'm dyslexic and the 13 is, I flipped it around or something.
There you go. That's what happened.
but so, I a little bit off on that one. But you're right. I think efficiency, when it comes to pass efficiency and those sorts of ratings and defenses, it's a little different. But you can look at and break those things down into a little bit more of the finer details. And And you gave me, I don't know if you gave it on your show, but you gave me a prediction after we talked last time that you thought Michigan would win by 2 scores, and lo and behold, they won by more than 2 scores. But yeah.
Yeah, if I could have kept Penix from throwing a pick that went back 80 yards, then it might have been 2 scores. But yeah, I was just about to say, the closer I came to the game, the more I was confident that Michigan was just a more complete team and just more physical, and just Washington just had to have so many perfect things go their way and just had to have a lights out. It's a burden to put on one guy to be, you've got to be almost perfect tonight. You got to play the game of your life. And he kind of did that against Texas, against a worse secondary and worse pass rush. So I kind of size it up like this, Nelson. And people misinterpreted this last night after the game, giving all due credit to Michigan. But let's say Michael Penix roughly had 40 dropbacks in both games. I think he missed more throws against Michigan, but it was like missing 7 or 8 throws instead of missing 2 or 3 throws. But for the other 30 or 32 or 33 throws, Michigan was in his face. The coverage was on point. So Michigan outplayed Texas those 30 or 32 out of 40 dropbacks, but maybe Penix missed another 3 or 4 or 5 throws against Michigan because he was really on against Texas.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, and it made me wonder, because I was sitting watching the game, and I'm thinking, is Penix, is it just the pressure? He was sailing some of these throws, and it seemed like he wasn't quite perfect. And you watch a game and you're expecting him to be perfect because that's what they have to have. And maybe, like you said, you're putting all the responsibility of the game on one guy, and I know that's a lot. I mean, he's a 6-year senior, but come on. I mean, that's a lot in the NFL. That's a lot for Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. It's too much a lot of times for those guys. And you look at the up and down seasons that they've had. And so, hey, I mean, Penix is going to be a great professional quarterback. I really believe that. I think he's got all the skills there. And this is not a situation that was built for him to succeed. Running game, you got a running back who's hurt, he's banged up, only goes 11 carries for 33 yards against a very good defensive line. And then obviously the defense is a weak point for your team, so it's all on you and your receiving core. And he did his best, and like you said, Michigan won the majority of those drop backs versus the 6, 7, 8, whatever that he missed on, where he had those opportunities.
So Michigan is the national champion. It's undisputed. There's no question. And attached to that, I believe, is the role of, or the designation as, they are the best. Now, I had some pushback on that after the game, because some people are going to say, well, they didn't get to play Georgia. Well, you could always, they only play so many games. It's not a baseball season. So they only play so many games. They can't play everyone. And shoot, Georgia, Michigan, sign me up for that game. If there could be only one game left and I could make a game, I would make that game up and say, let's play. But Georgia had its opportunity, didn't win a conference championship, and Michigan is the best team in the country, in my opinion, regardless of what Georgia brings to the table. So the national champion is certainly, 15-0. Like you say, it's one thing to win a national championship, but then to put that undefeated mark on it and be one of just a few teams to be able to complete it. This is the final 4-team college football playoff, so there will never be another of this kind. And they bookended Ohio State for the Big Ten, at least got 2 done for the conference over 10 years.
The begrudging end of the Power 5 and the 4-team playoff, for me at least, and all the realignment. And so it does feel good for Michigan to win that game, obviously, and sort of say, hey, we did it in this era of football, and now we're, it's a new era, and we'll see what happens there. But, you talked about the Georgia thing, and you hear that, and there's always those if, ands, or buts. But I personally think Michigan would probably beat Georgia if they did play. I think seeing what they've done against everybody across the board this season, it just feels like that would have been the case. They were just sort of a team of destiny. And the one thing I'm surprised you haven't brought up was we haven't talked about Connor Stallions or the sign stealing or anything like that. But my point about that is I don't think it had any impact on these last 6 games. So maybe it's not worth it. But some people will obviously want to make that argument that the season's tainted, and I'll push back against that. But if you want, we can talk about it.
Well, here's my stance on this, Nelson, is that leading up to the national championship game, and then once it was won by Michigan, that is Michigan's time to shine, to bask in that, for their fans to bask in it, regardless of what happened or what we may find out that happened. The players had no involvement in that. They shouldn't be tagged with that in any such way. So it is a national championship to be enjoyed by Wolverine Nation. And therefore, I've said for the last few days, we're not talking about that. And after the game said, we are not talking about that. Because here's my viewpoint is, based on what we have found out, there was one individual who cheated within the program. Now, how much widespread that is, that has not been discovered yet. But based on everything we know, that was dealt with, that was penalized. And so that's over. The NCAA is concluding its investigation. And until that time comes in which they either say that's all there was to it, or there is more and this is what it is, that I'm not going to further judge this football team or its results, because that needs to be discovered and revealed.
Yeah, a lot of respect for that. That's sort of where I stand as well. And yeah, we'll see where that plays out, I guess. But I don't think it has, it doesn't change anything for Michigan fans, that's for sure. I don't think they're going to think in any way that has any impact on, what they feel about winning a national championship and going undefeated. But something else to think about too is Harbaugh comes out and I think it was last night, he said that, it wasn't hard for us to push through this scandal because we knew we were innocent. Which was an interesting quote to hear from him, because it's the first time he's really directly spoken about it and made that declaration since before, way back when it first broke out. And so I'm curious to see where that plays out. But like you mentioned, and I appreciate let Michigan fans enjoy this, and we'll see what happens there. But so far, the proof doesn't, make it worth something to sort of hang over their heads for now.
I am going to bring up a somewhat negative aspect of this because it has to do with Jim Harbaugh. So there are so many indicators that say that he is probably going to move on. How are you weighing the evidence versus your own gut feeling about his decision?
So in weighing the evidence, you look at what's out there in the NFL. He said something last night as well about moving spring practice back a month, which I don't know if that's a good idea, but he wants everyone to enjoy it, and hey, that's go spend some time with your families and your friends and enjoy this, time in this win, which is fine. That's a good thing. If you're looking to repeat next year, maybe that's not the greatest, but that's okay. And you just won the national championship. I think you have the right to do that, but that's him looking towards the future, which perks some Michigan fans' ears. But then you look at what the opportunities are in the NFL, and you just have to think. And before this game and before I heard that quote, my thought was that he's leaving. Like I just thought, if they win this game, if they win the national championship, he's done what he came to do. He's accomplished what he needed to accomplish or wanted to accomplish at Michigan. He's brought them back from the depths of the Rich Rod era and the portions of the Brady Hoke era that were not good, especially the end there, obviously, to what they are now as one of the best team in college football and one of the best programs in the country. And so he's done that. And in my opinion, I think he wants to go back to the NFL at some point. And you look at the Chargers job, and if that's given to him, if that's the job where, if that's something that they put on a plate and say, hey, this is your job if you want it, I think he leaves. So that's the one I look at specifically. I look across the league. I look at the Raiders job. Don't love that job. Antonio Pierce might get hired there. I think they should probably hire Pierce based on what he's done, with what he has in the last portion of the season. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. So I think it's going to depend if he gets the right opportunity, and I think he'll leave if the Chargers offer him the job. I have no insider intel on that. That is just pure speculation based on what I've seen. And so we'll see if he ends up leaving. I also think he's really enjoying this moment, and that could also, change how he feels about that. Before, You win the national championship, and before you do that, if you don't win it, maybe he leaves anyways, because it's just can we get over this? If JJ leaves, if all these guys leave, can we get over the hump again? And that's not really how these people think entirely, but it's a realistic approach, and so we'll see if he ends up leaving or not. But I think if the Chargers offer him the job, I think he does leave. I predicted he would leave if they won the national championship, because I think they would offer him the job. And so we'll see about that. But I think also Harbaugh does really love where he's at and love what they've done, and he's really relishing this success. So it'll be hard for him to give that up as well.
I have long since thought that if given the choice between being a college head coach and an NFL head coach, and this was years ago, that if you have established yourself as Bobby Bowden, John McKay, Woody Hayes, Bo Schembechler, and you are the king of that state. You own the state. You have established yourself as an all-time great, and there's nothing that you can't do. Why not stay where you're at and just ride that? Because you can get just about any recruit you want. But that was a different day and age to a certain extent, rather than what we've seen in the NFL. Great coaches go to the NFL to a certain extent, most of them, and they get chewed up and spit out. And it's a long line of going 5-11 and 6-10. And you can only do that maybe 2 or 3 times and see ya. And you're just another guy.
Yeah.
Now, with all the issues that have to be dealt with on the college football landscape, which has always been making sure the kids are eligible, they're going to class, all of that business, they're staying out of trouble. Now you add on NIL and transfer portal. I would much rather work with adults and let a personnel manager, general manager deal with contracts and all of that business, and go to the NFL and not have to deal with this craziness of college football.
Yeah, I think that's going to be part of the big issue in college football, and whatever leadership ends up doing is restructuring the schedule as well. I mean, these coaches don't get a break, really, and that's partly why Harbaugh is going to give the team a month here. But the way that things work is you got to get on the road, you got to recruit almost immediately after. You do anything, so you get your bye week, you're going, after the national championship. All right, let's make some calls. Let's make sure we're solidifying up our class and doing these things. And so, Michigan is one of those programs that deals with it at the highest degree. All the uncertainty in the future of college football as well. And you always hear this term, the wild, wild west, and that's exactly what it is. And so if you look at what Harbaugh is, dealing with, and he's a 60-year-old man, and I would put zero blame on him for wanting to go to a league where you do get a summer off. You do get at least portions of the summer off. You get a vacation, you get a 3-4 weeks where you can just take time with your family and enjoy life a little bit. And you're dealing with professionals, and it's just a different game. And so until the NCAA or some other governing body that could come in and make some changes here does make those changes, you're going to lose coaches like Jim Harbaugh. And it's entirely possible that they do lose him to the NFL in major part because of that reason. And you're right, it's totally different than it used to be. So the mindset has changed there, I think, for a lot of coaches as well.
Well, I know he loves this university, and he is a Michigan man through and through. I don't know that there is a Michigan man who can be more of one than Jim Harbaugh based on his playing career, his coaching career, his ties to Bo Schembechler. And of course, he credits him as being just his mentor in addition to his father. And so he can walk away fully confirmed and convicted that, hey, I did everything I could. I brought it back to the summit, and I've left it at a great place. And now I can move on and maybe scratch that itch from that Super Bowl loss 10 or so years ago.
Yeah, he could. And you look at what they're, who they might replace him with. It is a young man's game in a lot of ways in college football. And you see Nick Saban, the way he talks about the direction of the sport, he's getting tired of it too. And he's older and, and much, maybe 10 years older than Jim Harbaugh is or thereabouts. But it is a young man's. Kirby Smart is a little bit younger there. Kirby Smart has obviously, he's, I think, in the perfect age right now where he has all the energy and also a ton of experience. And so that's why Georgia's so successful in part, aside from, where he's been and what he's done as a coach. And so Michigan, you look at their roster of coaches and who they might promote, Sharon Moore, Jesse Minter, Mike Hart, I think probably sits third in that particular order based on how Harbaugh has talked about more. And so, I also think that Harbaugh doesn't feel like he's putting them in a bad spot by leaving now. Obviously, you win a national championship and, you have guys leave. You're going to have players go on to the NFL. Probably some, if Harbaugh were to leave, might transfer. But what they have as a possible, promotion from within is a really good spot. I think you feel good with what Sharon Moore has done, filling in for Jim Harbaugh, and the trajectory of him as a coach and his career and how bright he is. So it wouldn't shock me. And I really think, like you've talked about, is that the way that the game has changed is going to have a serious impact on his decision-making alone.
Nelson, 3 years ago, coming off of 2-4, I was talking Michigan fans off the edge and defending Jim Harbaugh, and became a bit of a Jim Harbaugh apologist here every day, defending his record, defending his stops in the NFL and at Stanford, to say this guy is an excellent football coach. Just leave him alone. He'll be fine, and let him do his thing. He's going to make his way through that and reestablish this program as a contender. Did I predict this? No, I'm not going to pretend that I predicted this. No, in such way did I do that. But I did become a bit of a Harbaugh apologist in defending his coaching record and his ability, and he has pulled through in flying colors.
Yeah, I think the great coaches make those changes that need to be made, and Michigan made the right decision to give him time with a short leash, because when you get to that point, 2-4 season, a COVID year, very unique situation as well, but they had to make changes, and he did that staff-wise and identity-wise when it comes to their culture of their team. And so when he made those changes, that was a reaffirmation of what you've talked about of him as a great coach, I think. Obviously, that's proved true to this point. And so you look across all sports, and there are the greats for a reason. You give up on them, and that might be a failure on your part because you didn't, give them that chance or put them in that spot and say, hey, you got to make the changes or self-reflect here and do a little bit of figuring out what's wrong. And Jim Harbaugh did that, and to his own credit, and did it and came out with flying colors. He looked to his brother. He leaned on his past and what he's been able to do as a coach. Some of the guys that, or at least the playing styles on defense, offense, that have sort of been very successful for them. And you look at what they're doing offensively, it's a little bit more unique than what they did at Stanford. But, man, it's not that different, with their run game and the style of the run game at least. And then on defense, obviously, that's the Baltimore Ravens defense that they brought in with Mike McDonald and now Jesse Minter. And so Harbaugh's figured it out, and he just needed that time, like you said, to reevaluate and to readjust and reflect on what his team was and where they needed to make the changes. And great coaches will do that.
Maize and Blue Review is where you can find Nelson's work. Please join him right there. Nelson, anything in particular that people need to be aware of?
I'm going to see if I can get an opinion piece, if I can get my boss, Josh, to let me do an opinion piece on all this. I'm not sure that's going to be the case, but just keep your eye out. We're going to be doing a lot of work, obviously, after this national championship, and then we'll turn our heads towards recruiting sooner than later here and see where the 2025 recruits are sort of feeling about all of this success in this national championship. I think it's going to bode well based on what I'm hearing from Michigan. Very clearly, I think that's usually the case after a national championship.
Great stuff, Nelson. We appreciate you stopping by. And again, I know that it's got to be great to be able to just kind of bask in this, soak it up, and continue to enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.